Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree magazine. From the start, Buffalo Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, with every issue showcasing the best of Western New York. What's on stage, on view, in the clubs, and in the concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com.
They will come in and see things that they're not necessarily familiar with, and then many times leave a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, like another good example, and because I hear about this a lot, is people that, happen to be like subscribers to our series, and then they heard Trombone Shorty one time, and they had no idea who he was coming. Now they're fans. Now they never miss him every time he comes.
Hello, music lovers. Welcome to Why Music Matters, a podcast where we examine the power and influence that music can wield in our lives. I'm your host, Jeff Miers. Today, I'm excited to welcome an old friend to the podcast. Dave Wedekindt has been working behind the scenes to enrich the lives of music fans throughout Western New York for several decades. A tireless advocate for the arts in general and music in particular, Dave is currently the interim President of Artpark in Lewiston, New York, where he's worked to curate live music programming that appeals across generational lines, ranging from indie and alternative rock to the evergreen classics, and boasting a broad appeal while maintaining a cutting edge. Dave is also a musician and a lifelong music lover who, whenever he isn't hard at work behind the scenes, can be found near the front of the stage, basking in everything from modern indie music to the blues and back again. Join us as we talk about Dave's long and impactful career and his enduring love for music. Welcome to Why Music Matters. I'm Jeff Miers. Got a very special guest today. My friend, we've been friends for a pretty long time now.
Yes, we have.
Interim President of Artpark, Dave Wedekindt, a guy who, in a behind-the-scenes way, has done an awful lot, in my view, for the Western New York music community, the music scene. Brought some of my favorite shows here. And you continue to, and you have a long history in the music industry that I'd love to talk to you about. But first, I guess I'd like to know about your own love affair with music and how it started. I mean, I know there's more than just music to your job, but I know it's a big part of your life and your wife's. You guys share that passion for it. Can you talk about how you first got into music and what it was that grabbed you?
Well, I think it was, I think back on it and I first say thank heavens for music teachers.
Yeah.
Right. Because I went through Amherst schools and I can remember I think I was in fourth grade and we were called down to this room and we got to try out instruments because it's we got to pick an instrument now. It's kind of great that we could do that at that time. Right. And I determined that I really couldn't buzz my lips very well. So trumpet, trombone, all that was out. But I kind of took to the saxophone. So that started me down alto sax, and then I played that through school. And then I had a junior high Amherst Middle School teacher who really taught me discipline and practice and kind of the appreciation of music. And then when I got to Amherst High School, and Kurt Chase was the director at that time, and he kind of exposed me to the fun of music.
Yeah.
And that's probably the same time I switched to tenor sax. But then, so I had concert band, but then I also played, we had a jazz ensemble and we had a Dixieland band.
That's
And
cool.
then and then he turned me on to jazz improvisation. So I would use, like, if I had a free period, I think like my junior, senior year, I'd go down there and just jam in the band room because it was just open and he would just let us use it, right? And then the Dixieland band was interesting too because we turned it into like a little student enterprise. And then we were actually booking gigs for ourselves, in high school.
Is that the beginning of your music business acumen?
It probably was, yeah, because I think I was, I was one of the two guys on the business card. So
Cool.
Therefore I was like business manager, co-business manager, whatever you do. And we would play block parties around Amherst, and we'd play like church ice cream socials and stuff like this. And we had a whole shtick, but I was like, this is really cool.
That is cool.
And then when I was thinking about college, I was drawn to Fredonia. And because I knew I wasn't going to major in music, but I knew music would be there.
And you wanted to be around it.
Exactly.
And in Fredonia, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And so I went in as a business major, and then I think maybe halfway through my freshman year, decided to audition for the 7 o'clock band, which is kind of like the junior program of the FJE, Fredonia Jazz Ensemble. And then my second year, decided to go for the big show and got in FJE. So then I played tenor sax in the band, and I did that the rest of my time at Fredonia. And then I also started managing the band because it was a total student-run ensemble, which is pretty incredible when I think back on it, that we had like a faculty advisor, but that was a business.
Oh, yeah.
Because we rehearsed 6 hours a week, plus we'd have sectionals. And then during the holiday break, we toured the New York State. We played all these high schools, and we were doing clinics and performances and dances and what have you. And it was crazy.
That band, when I was at Fredonia, the FJE was just smoking.
Yeah.
Like they were killer.
Yeah.
So I'm sure this was the same experience. I don't know.
Totally. And it occurred to me that I'm like, and that's, I think, where the light bulb went off. It's like, I got to find some way of like doing these two things, because I was doing all my business courses, but, I was doing fine, but like, I wasn't like super passionate about going to work in a cubicle or something. Right.
Yeah. Office space.
And I knew I was spending more time in Mason Hall, and, just like when I wasn't practicing or rehearsing with the band, I was or doing business office things, things of working on, agreements for our recording we were going to do, setting up stuff with, in the whole sound recording part in Mason Hall there. We were just laying around on the couch listening to Keith Jarrett albums. And
awesome. I did a lot of that for Fredonia too.
Jan Garbarek and Michael Becker. And we were like
all ECM.
We were so deep in the ECM stuff. So I was like, this is cool. So then I was like, all right, now I'll go over and get to know Jefferson Westwood, who was running the Rockefeller Arts Center. I'm like, okay, you can show me about what this is all about. So then I started interning there, and then I finished at Fredonia, and then picked up internships in Buffalo because I'm from Amherst. So I was at the Philharmonic, and I was at Rockwell Hall, and I did a thing at Chautauqua Institution one summer.
This is all new to me. I didn't know.
I was like the professional intern, because I knew eventually something's going to stick.
Yes.
So then I ended up at Shays, and that right out of school, interning, and I just felt like if I just stay there, eventually I'll get a job out of this. So, and it worked out. So the development director left, took another job. They had no one in the development office. Patrick Fagan took a liking to me, and he's like, Dave, what do you think about being like a development associate? And I'm like, well, I never thought about fundraising, but here I am. So, and then the rest is history. I met my wife there eventually.
That's amazing.
So, 3 years at Shays, and then I was ready to move out of development, and I went into, I wanted to get into marketing, and that led me to UB Center for the Arts. So that was almost 20 years there.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
time flies.
Really
and
does.
It was concurrent with my time at the Buffalo News, which was great. A lot of it overlapped. Well, let's talk about UB a little bit, because while you were there, you had a real effect on the Center for the Arts and what was being booked. And I think it was a combination of your personal taste and just what was smart for the room. But one of the, this is one of the first time a lot of us heard the name Derek Trucks. I mean, I knew it because he played the Lafayette Tap Room when he was 15 or whatever. But you started a relationship with that band prior to it being the Tedeschi Trucks Band, when it was Derek's still young Derek Trucks Band. And then that repeated, and you really saw them building their audience here. And I really do feel like we have you to thank for that, because at the time, did it feel like you were taking a chance with that?
Well, when I first saw Derek, it was at a festival in Erie, Pennsylvania called Grape Jam. And I saw him in a barn.
Wow.
And he was, I think I figured out he might have been about 18 at that time, maybe even younger, but it was really interesting because it was this like hot, sweaty barn.
Yeah.
And there's this guy who looks like he probably tours with his mother on stage, and he's not even facing the crowd because he was really shy.
Yeah.
But he somehow like really connected with the drummer, so he would look at the drummer a lot when he played. But I remember just thinking like, there's something going on here, And I think and maybe I first heard about him when I was seeing Mo in New York City at Wetlands, and it was a Monkeys on Ecstasy show, which is they would tour they were performing under that name when they wanted to do an underplay.
Yes.
And I remember like the set break music could have been like a Derek Trucks album, and I was like really keyed in on this. I'm like, this. And so then I figured out, and you couldn't. I mean, that was before you could just pull an app up and figure out what it was. Yeah. But I think people were talking about it, and so then it stuck with me. And then so when we went to this festival, and I saw him on the bill, and I could check him out. And then maybe a year or two later, at Center for the Arts, we were kind of given permission to try things, because I think like Tom Burrows, who was the director, saw in me and a couple other guys, Rob Felgiano, who's known in Buffalo, was on the staff, and Joel Thompson, who was running the box office, and we all kind of had like a kind of a kindred spirit about music, and each had different tastes and ideas. Yeah. But Tom gave us permission to just build something. And we're like, and at that point in time, Center for the Arts didn't really know what it was.
Right. It was in the process of defining itself.
Yeah. And because it had a couple false starts that didn't work. But Tom was such a visionary, and he saw like, okay, this is a good music room. So what can we develop here? And he was at the point in his career, he wasn't really discovering new music. He knew good music, but he wasn't like out there looking for it. But he saw us as like being hungry, and he's like, hey, you guys like just do something. So then I suggested Derek. And at that point, Derek wasn't playing rooms like that. He wasn't at that level yet.
It was still bars or clubs?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the agent suggested we pair him with Eric Johnson, because they had been doing some dates together. And we knew Eric Johnson was a stronger draw.
Yeah.
People knew him from his radio hit or hits. So we put that together, and, it was a great show, but I just like walked out of there just totally converted.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people did. So then... And Derek, for many years afterwards, remembered that and would bring that up to me. He said, like, you were one of the first large venues to take a chance on us. And then we knew it's like, with an act like that, they're only going to build. Yeah. So let's just like make it an annual thing. And plus, Derek and the people that are around him have such a kind of organic approach to all of this. Yeah. And they were like, if we bring, if 100 more people show up each time, then that's progress.
Yeah.
So they weren't looking to like just blow out Center for the Arts and move on to the next thing.
That's unusual, isn't it?
No, they're in for the long haul. Yeah.
And look, it worked.
Yeah, and I really worked it because I really believed in that band. And I probably did more in promoting those appearances than many other acts that I did over the years, just because I believed in it personally so much. So I have memories of like going and picking the band up at some hotel next to UB and driving them over to Guitar Center, and we did like an in-store performance. And
I missed that.
Yeah, when they were doing releasing, I think the Joyful Noise album for that, and just then taking Derek on to radio interviews, and I remember one of my best memories was like him and I in my car. And I think his tour manager was along for the ride at that point too. And I was like racking my brain, like, what am I going to play?
I know.
You know?
I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
You're like, oh.
So I threw in Joe Henderson live at the Village Vanguard.
Oh my God, good pick.
And he was so impressed. And the tour manager even said, he's like, wow, okay. He's like, we always wonder, what are people going to put on when Derek's in the car? And then the tour manager happened to like,
good pick.
He had to like, he went to the first interview, then he had to leave. I think he had some friend in Buffalo he was going to hook up with. So Derek and I were just together the rest of the afternoon, and we just talked about jazz the whole time.
That's amazing.
You know, and so then each time feels like family with him, right? And as big as they've gotten, they've never lost, you know, touch of who they are. And I think that's what keeps drawing more and more people to them, because they're real people, and their whole organization is like that, you know. So yeah, so he was just one of, you know, artists that I feel like we really built.
Yeah.
Bela Fleck and the Flecktones come to mind too.
I wanted you to talk about more. I mean, I sent her on that because it just did it for me, you know.
Sure.
Made him absolutely one of my favorite artists. But what else while you were at UB? I mean, there were some incredible shows there.
Yeah, because it was, we did kind of fall into this jam band, Americana, original artist kind of thing.
Yeah. And early too, before that was really huge.
Yeah, and so Bela Fleck and the Flecktones fell into line, because we also really wanted to specialize in like musicians bands, right? And knowing that was such a great listening room too. It was not a party room. It was for people who wanted to just be in there and take it all in and appreciate what was going on, right?
Acoustically pristine.
Oh yeah, beautiful space. You know, I remember that. I did, you know, Medeski, Martin and Wood was a cool show in there. Charlie Hunter.
Yes.
You know, and with John Schofield was one show that like I loved. That's like, wow, we did all that stuff. And you know, in addition to all that, it was, you know, the dance performances and, you know, all of we covered such a broad spectrum, and it really opened my eyes and got me immersed in a lot of different things. So, you know, it's all inspirational. And then the rock shows, I mean, for a while we kind of hit a few of those, what I would call like, you know, victory lap kind of shows, you know, and like Gregory Hines' last performance was there, Ray Charles' last local performance.
Those are pretty good victory lap artists, though.
Levon Helm.
Yeah, that show was incredible.
Like, I mean, those will stick with me forever. And Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was just like a spiritual experience.
It was absolutely. It's just so unforgettable.
Yeah.
That night, it was special. Mm-hmm. And then John McLaughlin, too.
Oh my God, yeah, wow. With Jimmy Herring.
Yo, boy.
Was too, you know?
Yeah. I can see what you mean, though. Like, musicians that musicians just love and revere for very good reason, because they're virtuosos, but also absolute artists, you know? Yeah, I experienced a lot of that in that room. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it really did prepare the combination of dance, you know, the fine arts, music, all that did prepare you for Artpark in a lot of ways. Can you talk about that transition?
Yes, you know, it surprised a lot of people when I left UB. Things were changing though, because Tom Burrows had retired. It wasn't, you know, again, the university was like looking at like, what do we want to do with this space? There was some new leadership that weren't really quite seeing that value of what we were doing. You know, art centers at universities in general can be challenged because they're often looked at as like, well, what are we doing this for? Unless they happen to be like the only venue in town, and there's like clearly a defined purpose why it needs to be there, and it's providing the only arts for the entire community, right? Obviously not the case here, because we have so many great organizations in Buffalo. So around that time is when they had hired a new director at Artpark, and Tom was involved in that search. And then he introduced me to Sonia and said, you know, I think you guys should meet, because she needs to hear more about the market. She's new to the area and what works here and what people buy and don't buy and all that kind of stuff. We're unique. Yeah. So we hit it off right away, and I became kind of a good resource for her, and then ended up the year before I joined Art Park full time, I was doing some freelance publicity consulting kind of work for her and for the organization. And then the opportunity came, and it felt like the winds were changing at UB, and it was maybe as much as most people just stay forever at the university. I knew that I still had a lot of years left in me, and I wanted to still feel like I'm making a contribution. Yeah. And that, my heart's in it. Yeah. Right?
I feel you.
I couldn't just go through the motions.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. So in 2018, the opportunity came up, and I took it, so, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah.
So, I think we've done, Art Park's an interesting place too, because it's gone through a lot of different lives. It's, and it went through some dark times. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, for a while, started out as this kind of cutting edge land art movement location where they were, the money came in by the truckloads from the state, and they were kind of like set up to be like the SPAC of the Western New York, and kind of have similarities in the way the organizations were structured. But and I still to this day meet a lot of people who were there in kind of that first golden era, and what was happening there, and sounds like it's pretty wild. I mean, I was 2 when Art Park opened, so I do have some early memories of it, but
of going there with family.
Yeah, but I actually have more memories going when I was a student at Fredonia, and we would go to the jazz festivals. Because Bruce Eaton was producing those at the time.
Bruce Eaton,
and so I saw Jarrett Trio there. I saw Jerry Mulligan there. I saw Joe Henderson there. So it was like who's who. Wow, all these guys played that stage.
Legendary. I wasn't in the region yet, but I mean, my friend and former colleague Jeff Simon at the Buffalo News would tell me, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I missed that. Yeah. And I moved here, from sort of Capital District region, and I'd been working at SPAC, summer. A lot of my formative experiences were there. And it was the Newport Jazz, not Newport, Cool. The Cool Jazz Festival.
The Cool brand.
Named after cigarettes. Those days are over. But SPAC seemed bigger to me, and then I couldn't believe that Art Park was getting that kind of, what a gift to people here, opportunity to.
For sure. And, but then obviously in the 80s at some point that money dried up. Yeah. And then it was kind of cast adrift. And then, George Osborne came in, and then I don't remember the exact year, I think 90s, I believe, but it just, he was brought in because he was a turnaround expert. Yeah. And then had the vision to start this Tuesdays in the Park concert series, which brought it back in a big way. Almost too big for a while. Well, right? Yeah, for better for worse, I should say. And then, it just became this beast. And I remember kind of observing it from afar from the UB and all that, and we would look at that and be like, wow, that's not sustainable. It defies all logic why these bands should be attracting that many people. But then we kind of went through a thing in this market where it was all about free shows for a while. Totally. Every night of the week you could go and see a national touring act for free outdoors somewhere. Right? So crazy. And I think that's how he landed on Tuesdays, because he looked at the calendar and he said, well, there's Thursdays in the square. There's, all these different things happening around town. Tuesdays is open. Let's do that. And it also turned out to be a night that, usually bands don't have a lot of bookings. Right. So, you had more of your pick about who you could get on those. But, it just became too big for itself, though, So it, they did the right thing, with moving to a ticketed model. But I think that's when I learned too that it's wow, for just having to spend $5, keep that many people away. It was kind of sad. It was sad, but you do realize also that it's a pretty effective form of crowd control. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, even $5. Yeah. But I think, but then Art Park just kind of got labeled as the Tuesday night place. Right. And even when they expanded to the Wednesdays, Coors Light Wednesdays,
That's
where
right,
they
yeah.
wanted to some of the newer bands. They never, with a few exceptions, those never hit as big as the
That's right.
others did. So, and they did a lot of cool bands at that time. So I guess it was a natural evolution. But then, moved to current era, right? And we're still trying to honor some of that, but
Yeah.
we've had to move away.
Yeah.
We had to evolve because a lot of those bands just aren't even around anymore, or they're just going and playing casinos.
That's right.
Or they simply want too much money.
Yeah.
So
More than the market will really bear.
right, and we have to look at that model of subsidizing to that level isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
It's taxing on the organization, and every time you have to raise the ticket price, it means you're going to have fewer people show up for a lot of those nights. And then also, looking at everything, people sometimes will still point to like those years as like, well, Artpark was such a great success because you were packing in so many people, but you were serving the same people every single week. It was the thing to do. And they just showed up regardless of who was playing.
Because
It was cheap or free. All your friends were there. It was just the thing to do.
yeah.
But it's for an arts organization, that's not healthy and that's not sustainable because you're not growing your audience.
Right, because
So-
as those bands and their fans age out of the experience to a certain extent, everything changes.
Right. And so then you had a lot of, especially younger audiences were saying, well, that's where my parents go.
Right.
Or my grandparents go.
Right. They're going to see Leonard Skinner or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing for
against
me.
anybody. But
Yeah. So, we looked at it as like, okay, we've got to balance this portfolio here, right? So, internal efforts, working with some other, other partners and promoters. We did a lot with Fun Time over
Yes.
those years and kind of bringing in a new flavor and also testing out different pricing models and seeing what will the market bear here, So inevitably, that gets pushback from people and they just see you as getting greedy. But, these people, the general public doesn't understand what is going on in this whole music industry. at
No,
all,
they don't.
And
Do they need to? Well, it would probably make some of our lives easier if most people did. But it's maybe too inside baseball, for a lot of people.
yeah. But I mean, I give this one thing I say, it's like, are your groceries more expensive than they were a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, so how can you
wouldn't your
expect that this
entertainment-
artist can tour for the same amount of, same expense, and that we can, we all are paying our staff more and we all have higher expenses of doing business. So everything has to go up,
Of course.
so to keep things artificially low for that long. But to our credit, we still have, on most nights, kept a ticket
Yeah.
pretty reasonable. So even this season, most of them for the outdoor shows are $20.
It's
So it's that's a concerted effort by Artpark to
Yeah.
try to hold those tickets down and make it more open because we are by design a democratic, open place. Right? We would love to be able to do them for free, but all the reasons why we can't. So
non-sustainable.
exactly. So, but the trade-off is come up with a price that is not. Yeah, is it out of range for some people? Sure, but many people can swing that and
Yeah.
can justify that for
Yeah.
top quality touring entertainment.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
What about that kind of transitioning from the sort of heritage or legacy artists toward, at least a generation or two below that, maybe leaning more indie and alternative and sort of more inclusive, but while kind of maintaining some of that classic rock presence. Now, that sounds... That just is a lot more difficult than it sounds, is what I'm trying to say. Can you talk about how you did that? Like, how was it possible to do that, to keep some of the old without totally alienating people, and yet maybe urge them to go see a band they maybe didn't ever hear before or try something new, and also bring in some younger people?
yeah, it's tough because you don't necessarily want to go way out of left field.
Right.
And that's why we've made a determination that like certain genres of music just work better in our space. I mean, I believe that there's the right venue for everything. And sometimes you try to put the square peg in a round hole thing, it just doesn't work. And the audience will know that, and they just won't show up. Right. And that's never a recipe for success.
No, it is not.
Right? When they stay away. But, you know, I kind of think back to like what we would do at UB. Like, okay, if we found something that worked, and then we're kind of like, okay, what's related to that? All right. Okay, Buddy Guy is selling well. Okay, where else can we go in blues, electric blues rock? Right. So then it goes to Kev Mo, and it, you know, and we like kind of all those other players would like branch out from there. You know, I think then at Artpark, I look at it as like, well, if you like Leonard Skinner, then you should check out Whiskey Myers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you'll probably see a better show. But but it's hard to get people to take that leap.
It is.
Because people just kind of get into a box. And it's always been an interesting thing to me because, you know, there's certain people that stopped listening to new music like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And are perfectly okay with that.
Right.
Yet they keep seeing new movies. So what is this disconnect there that you can't, you know, like you can move forward in one thing, but you can't there?
I've always wondered that, and I don't know if it's because it's so tied to nostalgia for youth, or reminds them of when they were playing football in high school or whatever, well, you know, life is easier type thing.
Yeah.
But to challenge that sort of stasis is a very healthy and important thing to do, and it's really good for the community. You know, take your medicine, even if it doesn't taste good, it's good for you.
Right.
But did you find, you have found that some people made the leap to a blackberry smoke from a Leonard Skinner, or you said Whiskey Myers, you know,
No, I totally. And I think what we're developing now that we've kind of broken the mold.
Yeah.
Right? And I think actually, you know, if there's one upside to the pandemic, is that I think it gave us permission to try something different. Everyone came out of that a different person than when they went in, right?
You had to.
Yeah. So and seeing, you know, especially even the person who does not really pay much attention to entertainment organizations knew that everything went amok, right? And the whole live venues and business and that business knew that we had to all had changed the way we did things.
Yeah.
So I think that did give us some permission. And I think over time too, as we've moved away from kind of like those core, for lack of a better expression, you know, 97 rock playlist bands, now that audience has selected out. If they're not willing to move forward with us, then this is just no longer for them. And you can't be everything to everyone.
No, you can't.
Right.
That's another recipe for failures, attempting that. You can't be.
And I'd like to say, I mean, for any of the listeners who kind of may fall into that camp of feeling like alienated by where Artpark is going, I mean, it wasn't intentional here.
No.
Right? It's nothing
organic.
personal.
It was
it's
organic.
Just the way it went.
Yeah.
But I encourage everyone to come in and check this out. But now I feel like we're seeing more is that we're building more of a trust among the audience. And so they will come in and see things that they're not necessarily familiar with, and then many times leave a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, like another good example, and because I hear about this a lot, is people that, you know, happen to be like subscribers to our series, and then they like heard Trombone Shorty one time, and they had no idea who he was coming. Now they're fans. Now they never miss him every time he comes. So there's, you know, it's often those kind of shows that people talk to me about the most. It's not, you know, yeah, sure, the Steve Miller Band shows are great, and the Frampton shows are great, whatever, but discovering new music is what stuck with them, because I think maybe in their own lives, they don't have the vehicle or they don't have the drive to discover new music that they kind of need it presented to them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, kind of another thing we're working through in modern society too, is like the gatekeepers and the tastemakers.
Curation, you know.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think that's very much a role you've served in Western New York, doing that and help kind of like separate the wheat from the chaff. And just, a lot of people just need some kind of direction.
Yeah.
Because you can just, you know, you can just open up Spotify or wherever you're getting your music and just be lost.
You can.
And the reality is there's a lot of garbage on there too.
Oh, there's tons of garbage. It's not, you know, there are people that continuously say there is no good music being made anymore. And it's like, I think we would agree that is completely untrue.
Yes.
But I understand why they say that, because they just don't know where to look to find it. And, you know, I mean, I had this experience writing over the years where, for example, I wrote early on about Steven Wilson, who became, you know, a pretty popular artist and
Porcupine Tree.
Porcupine Tree, and then his solo work. And I still run into people who were, you know, I didn't know anything about that until you wrote about it. And then I went to see the show, and now they travel to see him. And all I had said was, if you grew up on Genesis or, you know, and you think there's nothing good, check this out. This is a younger, newer artist at the time. And it really does work. I mean, there are people who just can't be bothered, but there are a lot of people who can, and they are looking for that. Sort of, you know, somebody leaving the trail of breadcrumbs so they can make their way through the mess of the streaming world, you know?
Yeah, I think we are seeing more patrons like that when you look at some of like the purchase histories for some of these people. And and I would see that at UB too. I'm like, all right, they're buying modern dance, and they're also buying Joe Satriani, and they're buying, you know, and it's cool. Like, and that's exactly the patron we want.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that at Artpark, because they're like really just like, and I was hearing that just the other night, the Gary Clark Jr. show. It's like I'm hearing people talking out on the terrace, and they're like, well, I'll be back for OAR, and I'll be here for Stray Cats, and I'll be for, you know, so it's like, that's great. I love it. Then, like, mission accomplished.
Definitely. I mean, I've really seen it. And just I talk to people all the time because I want to know what they think, you know. You just mentioned Gary Clark Jr., and as we're speaking, that was just a few days ago. What an incredible show. And it was one of those things where we talked about this a little bit before we were recording. I expected that he would be good. I listened to his new record. I'm like, I really like this. This is different. It's pushing the edges of, you know, a blues rock person. Like, he's doing a lot here. The show just blew my mind, though. I mean, this was indoors, the main stage theater for people who are listening. It wasn't an outdoor show. That is a beautiful sounding room, too. And boy, did it sound beautiful that night. But I'm babbling a little bit, but the point I want to get to is that I've had what, for want of a better word, I'd describe as some spiritual experiences at Artpark. Sometimes outside, when the perfect music meets the perfect setting, the sun's going down over the gorge, you know. Wow. And then just other times where I just realized, I don't know, everything came together, and I just felt so elevated, and I felt like part of a community that was witnessing something so beautiful, and we were sharing it together, you know. I don't know, that show felt really special to me. Do you have those experiences, or being so inside it, does it ruin it for you a little bit?
No, because I'm still a fan.
Yeah.
You know, I think obviously when, you know, I have a lot of other things going through my head on show nights than your average patron would have. I will say at that Gary Clark show, it took me back to a lot of those UB days, because like everybody that was there was like, oh, these are all the UB people, you know, so that were like, who are true music fans, and they know like this is the place to be tonight.
Yeah,
like, this is gonna be a happening, right? Because the people just know, and you can feel it, right? So I had that buzz, and I still get that buzz, like, you know, before a show, and the excitement of everybody coming in, and they're like, oh wow, this is gonna happen.
Just a feeling like that.
You know, I love it, you know, and Tom Burrows used to say, like, you know, we all work for that moment when the audience is in their seat and the curtain goes up. You know, it's true, because all of these moving parts and all we have to do to get there on all parts of our team
is leading to that moment.
Gets to that, right? Yeah. And but I'm still a fan. And so when I was able to sit there and like take this all in and like see what was unfolding on stage and hear it and hear the reaction of the crowd, and you know, and it was just a cool audience. It was a diverse audience. It was great to see. And it was really. That's
what I'm getting at. I just felt part. Like, these are all my brothers and sisters here. Exactly. You know what I mean? And
and I get that, you know, a lot. And I think part of that is the Artpark experience, right? we get that outdoors when we have the My Morning Jacket shows, which are the Flaming Lips shows. It's just so that's where, another example of the perfect band in the perfect setting and the perfect audience, and just those, especially like in the outdoor environment when you have that beautiful sunset and you just get this whole thing. And then especially when the artist is so struck by it that they stop. I remember in my first summer, we had Bruce Hornsby there, and he stopped and he was just like looking at it. He's like, look at this. And he's like, I didn't even know about Artpark. And he's like, now I have to come back, And so, but it was funny because like I was so, that kind of like, that was also a night that kind of like showed like the separation between old Artpark, new Artpark and all that too. Cause then I was just being blown away. I'm listening to him solo and I'm like, oh, he's like playing all these like Bill Evans lines.
Very Bill. And Jarrett was sneaking in there too.
And it's like, and he's a guy who's never stayed in one place.
No.
And
creative wanderlust.
Yeah. And, you can't pin him down. So then I remember hearing like the feedback after the show and people were like, all that piano playing. I was like, well, what did you think he does? And,
it's like going to a Van Halen show and complaining about too much guitar.
Yeah. And it's like, where's the range? I'm like, could you even name a member of the range? That's like 30 years ago or whatever.
So funny.
So, and, where are the hits? And he did the hits, but you left early because he was, too immersed in some kind of solo.
Yeah.
And these guys that aren't like, they're not there to like entertain you. Like it's a group.
Yeah.
Right. He considers himself part of the band.
Yeah.
And
that's
he
how musicians
lets the band
think.
play. Exactly. If he's looking at him to come up there and dance for you, it's not going to happen. Right?
No, I'm playing. The entertainment is the music.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're an alternative, if you're going to stand there and yell dead tunes at him all night too, that doesn't go so well either.
It's so rude.
He's moved on from that. Right.
It's a part of who he is, you know, and
yeah. But I think, that venue is very special for that kind of show too. And sometimes when it's like a giant party, like Earth, Wind and Fire or something like that, and everybody's just happy and dancing, all ages
uplifting
are there, and which is kind of like a neat thing, even with the acts that we were talking about earlier, the classic rock acts that maybe we're kind of not doing as much anymore. But it was another thing that struck me my first year is like, as much as they may be dismissed at times because their hits were 40 years ago or whatever it is, or they're still playing.
Doesn't mean they're not good. A lot of them are super valid.
Exactly. Those songs were brilliant.
Yeah.
And they hold up, and multiple generations want to hear them. So when you're seeing like high school kids and senior citizens all singing along to the same song, it's like when you've done something right.
I think so. You have to have a pretty hard heart not to feel that.
Exactly.
It's very, and I've had a lot of those experiences there. A big part of why music matters, in my opinion, this sense of community and this, the yelling and the judging and just goes away when it all comes together. And it's happened to me a lot there. So what about this season, which just, that was your first show. You're in it now.
We're in it, off and running.
This feels, we have to talk about the pandemic again, but we kind of do because, there's kind of been a lot of venues wobbly kind of coming back out of the gate. But I feel like Artpark seems pretty confident. I mean, it seems very strong, very confident. And it's a really solid season. And I'm only speaking about the music here. Obviously, there's many other things going on as well at Artpark. But talk about some of the partnerships. You talked a little bit about Funtime and Donnie Kutzbach and Artie Quitchoff. And talk about how partnerships kind of helped strengthen you coming out of.
Yeah, well, I think, as I was saying, like coming out of the pandemic, all the rules changed.
Yeah.
The touring industry changed a lot. The touring industry was really hit hard because they lost a lot of people who were just like contract employees, truck drivers, production personnel, all that, who like went without any kind of funding and didn't have any kind of bailout or anything at the end of all this.
Nothing.
They just had to go and find day jobs, and they haven't come back. So that's contributed to a great increase in expenses because everything just,
I think it's
scarce.
important people know that.
Yeah.
It changed.
Yeah. And, and the artists didn't make any money for a couple of years. And, they're not sitting there living on the royalties from their greatest hit album from 50 years ago, right? They need to work. So, that's contributed to an increase in the artist fees. The competitive environment has changed a lot too. And where we've really felt the squeeze is the casinos.
Mm-hmm.
And, most recently, the opening of the new space in Niagara Falls, Ontario. But their approach to booking is so against what we believe in. It's not about artist development. It's not about fulfilling a mission. It's just purely a reason to get people in the door.
Yeah.
So hoping that they'll lose some money on the tables on the way in and out.
And
right?
because of that, they're artificially inflating the market, right? Is
Right.
that correct?
And it's a competitive process, and happens every year. It's happening even more. I was outbid by 75%, 100%, double. And they don't even blink, and you'll get this call back from the agent like, oh, this casino's offering this. Can you beat it or match? And we're like, no. That's insanity.
No. A $50,000 band is
Right.
not worth
Right.
$500,000 or.
And sometimes, there are certain bands that do have more of a conscience about it, and they'll be like, that's not the right venue for us. We'd rather just do Artpark,
And that's cool.
Yeah, and I've seen like, bands that you never would have expected to ever be playing casinos are now doing that. The money is just so
It's hard
attractive.
to say no.
And you're going to get treated like kings and queens. You're going to play an hour and a half set, and then you're done, and it's a lot less work, I guess. And maybe the money they're going to make on that means they don't have to play as many nights that week.
That's right.
It's all part of the equation. So Artpark is, and I'll hear this from people like, why didn't you get so-and-so? I'm like, we tried.
Yeah, we couldn't.
We couldn't, because for me to book that show would have meant that the tickets would be $350, and you wouldn't pay that.
No, you
wouldn't.
wouldn't.
So how does that help Artpark, right? So we just have to cut our losses and move on. There is the Outer Harbor in Buffalo that's opened up. I know a lot of people are excited about it. It's another amphitheater in the Buffalo market.
Yeah, which is not that huge.
We're not serving different audiences.
Yeah.
A lot of the programming that's landed for this year are programs that you have seen at Artpark before, or we had offers in to bring to Artpark, and
or Borderland, or there's some crossover.
And I think too, when decisions are made about building these venues, they're often not made by people who fully understand how this business works. I mean, in a normal economy, you can say, well, competition is good. It drives the price down, whatever. It doesn't work that way in the entertainment business. Competition, in our case, means that if I don't offer band A what they want, they'll just call up somebody else in the market and see if they'll get that. And if that one doesn't work, they'll call the third one, and ultimately they'll get the money they want. And the only ones who make out are the agents.
Right.
And the bands, maybe, because they're getting a larger payday.
Often
and it's
they
not
don't
to say
even
bands
know.
shouldn't be paid,
No.
but they don't know.
Right.
And then, so if they end up going and playing a casino and most of their fans can't even get a ticket, they're either overpriced or they end up getting just relegated to the back of the room.
Right.
And the best seats
And
are
have a
given away
lousy
to high
experience.
rollers.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're playing in this sterile ballroom or whatever it would be, It's not a great.
It's not very enjoyable.
Right. And
as a fan.
No. And so it hurts me when that happens. I mean, I don't take it personally, but it is what it is because thankfully we still have enough relationships. And we built enough. But there's only so much time, disposable income, and people to go around to support all of these shows. And so I do, and I've said it, I think Western New York is blessed to have as many venues as we do for the size of the market, but We have too many now.
It's dangerous.
You know, we're at a tipping point. We're going to lose somebody here.
My fear is, and when I was critical of Save Live coming in and opening Electric City in the site of the former Trout, for right here in the theater district where we are right now. My criticism was based on the idea that, like, well, if the real mission of Save Live is to help markets and venues bounce back from the pandemic, it would have been a great idea to help the ones that were here and endured it, continued, a lot of them that acted with a lot of integrity and had to make difficult decisions, but endured and kept providing for us, for their community that they know so well. When I was critical of that, some of the pushback I got was from people who were like, hey man, the more choice, the better. But I'm like, you don't understand. You're confusing that because you don't. Right now, that might seem like more choice, you know, more opportunities for you to see things you want to. But market disruption ends up being like, you get that for a while. Then a lot of your other choices that were here before aren't going to be here anymore. You end up with less choice. Then they're in. The first one was always free, right, kid? And then now you're going to be paying a lot more, and you're going to have less choice, really.
Right. And I think people forget too, especially in our world where, you know, we're all consumers of live music and we go to a lot of things, see a lot of shows.
My soul needs it, man.
Yeah, we need it. But the average person goes to like a couple shows a year. So they might be the person who goes to like 2 arena shows, 1 Darien Lake show, and then they're done. Because they've seen like...
There's people who go to even less.
Right. So, you know, to have bands playing somewhere 7 days a week, you know, all touring acts that really need people there and spending good money and, you know, every night of the week, it's not sustainable. I think that we've been in a period in the entertainment business where things have been really good. Yeah. You know, and everybody loves to, you know, brag about the amount of attendance and the grosses and all that kind of stuff. And the artists love to brag about, you know, how many tours they sold out and, you know, how many tickets are being sold to Taylor Swift concerts and all that kind of stuff. But it's such a small, that is like its own little world in itself.
It's an anomaly in a way.
Absolutely.
You know?
So it's tough. So, I mean, I can see... You know, I'll mention because I hear about it from people that are seeing more like Live Nation's name on more of our shows. And no one has to be concerned that we're a Live Nation venue. No. We are still a not-for-profit, you know, mission-driven organization.
On specific shows.
But they are content partners because if we're going to take on the casinos, we need someone who's got more leverage and has the whole tour. And is going to place one of those dates here at Artpark, right? Because they're not all evil overlords.
No,
you know, as the media likes to paint them.
No,
right?
it's easy and reflexive.
Exactly, they're easy targets, right? But I joke and I used to say like when we're dealing with you know, the casino buyers that it's like I'm bringing, you know, a knife to a gunfight, but now I say like I'm bringing a plastic spoon to a gunfight because I just can't, you know. So. I just encourage everybody, like, if you believe in what your favorite organization is doing, you know, clubs or, you know, larger venues or whatever, just support them. Yeah. Just show up, go, because we're all kind of slugging it out, you know, and it's like, you know, Artie and Donnie, I love those guys. Yeah. And then the fact that they've kind of followed this independent path for so long is to be admired, because even they're not for profit, but they have a mission.
They definitely have a mission, and
right?
It's been consistent.
Yeah,
and there's integrity in that.
Right. So I can, but you know, they have to shift and they have to adapt to now a new club across the street from them. What's that going to mean for them? They have to look at like, okay, how are we going to keep putting food on the table? You know, like you take a bigger stake in something somewhere, and you know, at the Outer Harbor presence worked for them. It was a natural move, and you know, So they're not working with us this season. It's not to say we won't again down there, but this is, you know, ebb and flow of things. So we'll see how it all works out. And I think the outer harbor will have to figure out what its identity is,
Yeah.
what works there, what people do, what do they respond to there, which will be different than what people respond to at Artpark. So
Oh yeah.
we can kind of figure out some way of like load balancing all of this. I think we can get there, but it's just not. More competition is not better for this business.
It really isn't. I mean, there's enough. There already was enough. Well, a tip of the cap to people who've maintained their independent spirit and, their independence as business people, in this market where it's really difficult, And I do think that people should know that because, again, my problem with Live Nation it has long been, and this is just a very short little condensed version of it, who is the music for? The music, I'm not one of these people that believes everything should be free. I'm not totally well beyond that idea. But I do think that you shouldn't have to be incredibly wealthy to be a real live music supporter. And it's becoming difficult to do that, and monopolistic kind of behavior can make it difficult for that to change. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I do feel that music is super important to building community and culture. And even if it's a touring act, it does build a sense of localness. To have those acts come to our city and play for our community, and especially if they come back often, build a relationship.
Right.
Do you have thoughts on that? I know it's hard for you because you're wearing a couple hats.
Oh, I could spend hours on that. No, it's concerning to me where it all is, but I think people also need to understand that there's a lot of different angles to this.
Yeah.
At the root of it is the relationship with the promoters has changed.
Yeah.
And, and I think people will point back that it was, Zeppelin and Peter Green, Peter Grant that broke that model. Then you had Irving Azoff and Eagles.
He gets played for everything.
Pushing the $100 ticket threshold, and now it's like starting point is $100. $100, right?
I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. The problem is now too that the artists aren't sharing in the upside, they're sharing the upside. They're not sharing the downside.
Right.
So the promoters,
they're not sharing the risk.
Exactly. We are essentially banks. So we are putting up all of the money with the hopes that this is going to at least break even. But if it doesn't go well, there's very rarely any consideration on the other side. In a fee reduction or whatever it would be. So you're taking a huge gamble. On paper, it's funny because putting on like my business hat, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
what we do, because it's like you're gonna risk that much money for this potential little reward. Like why? But we have our other reasons that compel us to do this. And because when it works, it's the most amazing thing in the world, right? You don't talk about like this, like we don't have these conversations like this about checking accounts, right? It's just
exactly, exactly,
like life-changing moments, right?
And they are,
because you got an extra 1% on your CD rates. But it, no offense to the bankers, but but there's really, it's become so sanitized and separated. And nothing is left to chance. So when we look at like what's happened on pricing, that is simply a reaction to the prevalence of the resale markets, because as easy as doing everything online has made it for buying tickets, it's made it much easier for the bots to function and scoop up tickets and manipulate pricing and all that. So in a way, you can't blame the big promoters for having to kind of dip their toes into that too, with platinum seating or whatever it be, or all these VIP packages, because they're just trying to keep some of the money away from the resale market, because the artist doesn't get any benefit of resale.
No.
And actually, a lot of customers get screwed by resale.
No
because
question.
We've had people, not only overpay, sometimes they have bogus tickets.
Yeah.
They'll show up at the venue and they're like, I paid all for this for the ticket, but this guy told me he only paid 20. Mine 150. We're like, well, because you bought from
You
a
didn't buy it
resale
from
site.
us.
Like,
Yeah.
I know I bought it from Artpark. No, you didn't. So these sites have gotten, you feel bad for the patron because they don't know. And they've just been burned. And we're at a position, well, the show's sold out. I can't just let you in. I'm sorry that you have a bogus ticket. I mean, we do whatever we can to accommodate people if they really have gotten in a bind and really have made a compelling argument and concern.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like, they're here at the show because they're excited to be there and they can't wait to see it. And
it's
they're
heartbreaking when that
they're
stuff
standing
happens.
at the gate in tears, and we're trying to make this right, even though it wasn't our wrongdoing, right? So, but either way, the venue gets blamed, right?
Of course, because people don't see
Right.
several
So
steps of how this works.
So I think that's kind of what has driven a lot of that. So, but somehow in this process of, Congress getting together every few months and lining up Live Nation and Ticketmaster to, AEG is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They have a ticketing company as well. They're all in, and every venue has a ticketing contract with whatever it would be. We don't sell on multiple platforms because that would be total chaos.
Right.
Right. So and Ticketmaster just happens to be the best at doing it. They're also paid to take the heat. So they exist for everyone to be mad at. And then the artist loves to pick on Ticketmaster and they'll complain about the fees. But the artist is a full participant in these things, right?
No question.
So
they're cashing the check.
Yeah, they love to dodge this and, oh, it's not me. And there's ways around this. We could go into all-in ticketing, but then that would mean a higher ticket price and the artist feels that would make them look bad, right? So there's a lot of reasons why this is occurring, but I do regret that the whole resale business has successfully lobbied government to allow them to continue at the level they are, right? I mean, it's all really rooted in organized crime. And it's hard to stop it because they could be running offshore websites and operations and you'll never catch them. But even if you could put some rule in there that you can't sell a ticket for X% above face value, would really curb a lot of this, and it would take the motivation out of it. So you have a market is like, I'm sure 90% of the tickets they buy up, they never sell, or they end up having to just sell at a deep discount. But if they get enough of the hot tickets, if they scoop up enough of the Taylor Swift tickets and all that, they've paid for everything and more, and at no effort. And
they can end up with Deadwood at the end, and it doesn't matter.
Exactly. And the fan loses out. But then you end up with these situations like the whole thing with Taylor Swift, and people are upset because they can't get tickets. But then that also comes back to simple supply and demand.
That's right.
You can't. It's like if Bruce Springsteen decides to pay Town Ballroom and it sells out in 3 seconds, is that the fault of the ticketing company?
No.
Is that the fault of Town Ballroom? No. It's just fact that there are more people that want to see him than there are spots in the venue to attend, right? So it.
However, if ticketing agency bought up like 50% of those Town Ballroom Springsteen tickets and then sold them for a ridiculous price,
exactly,
then there is some blame.
Right. So it is the Wild West.
It is the Wild West,
and nobody really wants to own it. It's really the independent promoters, because we have a conscience about it, and at some point in corporate level work and arenas and all that, the arena world is very competitive too. There's a lot of buildings and there's only so many acts that can play an arena.
I know.
So immensely competitive. So they have to, and they've only got that one shot to make all of that money back. So it's, they're not, the artist is keeping all of the money, and if the show does really well, they're also getting a bonus on the back end. But you're relying on your service fees and your concessions and your parking and all that to
Just to
pay your
make it.
bills, right? So that's where we are. So I mean, that's kind of like my feeling on the business. I mean, it's, I hate to say it because I'm in it, but it is broken in many ways. That somehow it just got out of control. And because we went through a period of just like it seemed like everything was just selling. Everything's been great. Everything's like breaking records. The grosses are higher than ever. But then you'll also read these stories where artists will be like, I can't tour anymore because it's become impossible for me to tour because I can't afford it. Right. And like, I mean, I remember Lorde made there was a lot of like things she was saying, and she's a successful artist.
She's big.
Yeah. And it's like still like having trouble make this work because it's expensive to put these shows on the road and tour. And we also have to think about our artists touring too much.
Yeah.
You know, I understand the reason to be out there because you're driven as a musician to share your music. You also are driven to put food on your table and take care of your family and these organizations that you're supporting. It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
And that's a lot of pressure. Like you're a corporation now. And so you've got to stay out there. But at the same point, like you can't keep going back to the same market year after year after year and expect that you're going to play to increasing results. Now you're going to be disappointed, and then you're going to burn some promoter who's going to lose money, and then they're going to think twice about bringing you back the next year. And I think there's something to be said for artists that get out there and then they go away.
Yeah.
You've got to let people miss you sometimes. Like I think Adele is brilliant at that. She would just be like, she's everywhere and then she's nowhere.
She's nowhere for a couple years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Then she comes back.
As opposed to like somebody like Taylor Swift, who's like, you know, will never turn down any opportunity for some kind of exposure. I mean, she took over the NFL the last year too, right? So, but
crazy.
Will it hit a point where people are like, I've had enough? You know, and I think it is kind of, but I mean, even like.
It's not even a question of artistry or any of that.
Right.
It's just.
You know, and it just becomes like they kind of get stuck in their own, what's the word? You know, they're in a bubble.
Yeah.
Right. They're on their own echo chamber.
Yeah, echo chamber.
And they don't, and everybody, then they're all just surrounded by yes men and women, and they can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, don't put out the 30-song album. Why don't you just pick the best 10, you know, and deliver a real banger, and you'll be much better off. You know, exactly, right? So there's a lot of I think the business itself as a whole needs to check itself.
Yeah,
and I do feel like, and I've heard this, you know, talking with, you know, obviously all the venues, we talk to each other, promoters, we all talk to each other, we share the good and the bad and all that kind of stuff, and it. We feel like the other shoe is about to drop.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see it because it's like there's going to be those shows that are just runaway hits that everybody wants to be at. But there's going to be a lot of them where they're just going to scrape by or they're going to lose. And it's not for any fault of the band, but it's not that they aren't worthy.
No.
But, you know, now you've hit this point of like time and money, right? And what can the patrons support? So it's tough. Because you don't want to burn out your audience, but at the same time, you can't just roll up the rugs and give up because that's what we do.
Right, that's what we do.
We have to ride it out, you know. Which is like another thing I really like about Artpark is that I always compare it to a diversified portfolio, you know. So we're not locked in on doing a specific things. Right. If this isn't working, we can kind of shift this way, or like, well, let's explore this path, and we're given kind of permission to try different things, and we can use different spaces in the park, and we can do we can now use the main stage as a black box theater instead and do like a really cool Brazilian jazz event like on the stage for 100 people. You know, these are like the things we can do, which excites me personally. Yeah. And so you can keep that like music, that discovery and that like kind of artist development piece alive. Knowing that there's going to be some nights where it's just kind of like pure commerce. Yeah. Because that pays the bills. And that's going to support some of your passion projects. Right? So you can do the mix of it. Yeah.
So the balance. Well, I feel like you've been able to achieve that. How is your feeling for the future?
Well, I still love the business. I'm still driven by it. Like I said, I still get excited, you know, and regardless what the show is, I have anticipation. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing how it's all going to go because, you know, I've been fortunate too that I haven't worked with any venues and been involved in programming it where you like feel like you got to hold your nose. Yeah. You know, that's like, no, this is good. and even, and it's quick, it's easy to be dismissive of some of the tribute acts and things like that are out there. And some venues, as we know, kind of make their stock and trade in it. But
I think there's room for all of it. But
but I mean, there's a lot of it right now. It's tempting, and they're making a lot of money. And they're very successful at what they do. It's very tempting to go into that. We, for the most part, have resisted, but we've found like some that will like really believe in like yacht rock review, like really like well, this is like. They're doing the music and they're doing it tongue in cheek, but they're all like really good players.
They're
too.
serious players, yeah.
So we brought them in last year, and we paired them up with Richard Marx, and then they're back this year opening for Train. Yeah. And I think like maybe after this, like they're a headliner at Artpark, because it's like people see them and they're converted.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and doing like we did Rain last year, and it was like
those are classier.
They're classy, and they do a great job. It's more of a theatrical performance than just a straight concert. So I think there's room there. I mean, I do have concerns about what it's going to look like and how we're all going to compete with one another. Yeah. Because we are, as much as we all want to feel like we're all in it together, and we're all kind of slugging it out for those bookings and for those audiences and that support. But I think it'll take care of itself. I mean, I've always been a long game person. I just you got to ride the waves, because you look at it in artist careers too. Definitely. They're in, they're out, they're up, they're down. It's really I was talking recently about Buddy Guy, and did him a bunch of times over the years. And there was a guy who didn't even have a record label at one point, and now he's on this like never-ending victory lap now. And finally, like other artists stepped up and said, he's the guy. Like we learned it all from him. Yeah. So go and see him, and then people do, and they're converted, right? Yeah. And now he's doing very well and still doing it, right? So. You've had some artists that sell out and they come back the next time and they play to half the house, and they come back. You take a chance and do them the third time and they sell out again. Yeah. It's such a weird business. It doesn't make any sense why it goes like it does. And then you have these others that just seem to come out of nowhere. Yeah. I just recently, Chapel Rowan was right at the Outer Harbor, and I'm like, I didn't know who she was. I think most people didn't know who she was.
Yeah, but a lot of people
6,000 people couldn't wait to be there, right? So, but that's great, because it keeps you have to stay a student of the art.
Absolutely. I think that's important.
You can't just coast, because it moves so fast. And, and we also have to remember our place as a secondary market. Mm-hmm. We're not priority. We might have to, it takes a little more convincing sometimes to say, do the Tuesday night in Buffalo, do we want to do that? Or Monday night, is that going to work? It's like, it's going to work. Like Flaming Lips, you can play Monday night at Artpark, and it's doing just fine. Yep. Yeah, because it's the combination of people know it's going to be an event that if I don't go to, I'm going to regret not going, right? So so I always encourage people, if you have any inkling to go, just go. Okay, so you'll be a little tired if it worked tomorrow. The next morning, you'll get over it. It'll be worth it.
Your life will be enriched.
Right, exactly.
We rented a school bus and filled it. So
well, thank you.
So, and it was with some people like, I don't really know that band. I'm like, buy a ticket, check it out. Yeah. Send them a few recommendations. And we're gonna all ride on the bus. It's gonna be great.
Right. It's
they'll be fans forever.
It's a band that is like so Artpark.
It's perfect
because it's freaky cool, and
it's also so Buffalo in a way too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they're tied to that. Yeah. The sort of UB and the Paul Sherritts and the underground art scene here. Mm-hmm. It's great. It's a celebration of all that.
It really is. So I feel like it all comes together. So that'll keep driving me. Yeah. And I'm this far into it. I'm like 30 years into it now. So I can't imagine doing anything different now. I'm so thankful of the experiences along the way. Yeah. And I've got to know a lot of great people like you, and just really who have a passion for it and just will sit around, just talk music and I've always been surrounded by people like that, right? So it drives you, and I take inspiration from them too, and ideas too. And I always tell people, because people will say to me, "Oh, you should book this one or that one," and there are plenty of times that it just makes no logical sense. It's just no. And I hate to be, I never mean to sound dismissive, but I'm like, I'm doing the math like in my head, and it's just not going to work, right? And I know what they're doing, and we're either too big or we're too small. But now and then I do get, people who are like, you should look at this one. And I'm like, and like I can remember a couple of years ago, one of our sponsors said to me, you should look at Goose. Like, oh, I've been hearing a little bit about Goose. And like, then we got them the next year, and it just blew up. And I'm like, and now look at them now. Yeah. So there are people who know what's going on out there, and you got to listen to them too, because I can never be the expert on everything. So I'm always open to hearing ideas. Yeah.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Thank you for spending time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'll be seeing you soon. I like this. We were having 42 North day trekker today, Dave and I. And pretty tasty. I like.
It's good. Yeah.
Not bad. Buffalo beer. Thanks, Dave. I'll see you soon at Artpark. Flaming Lips. Can't wait. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Jeff.